it's not the diet that failed. It's actually the mindset of the person doing the diet that is failing. So, in my opinion, the number one reason why people continue to fail at long term weight loss success is the all or nothing mindset, the need to be perfect in order to be successful.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Today, we're speaking with a registered dietitian and entrepreneur who specializes in weight loss nutrition. She is known as a renegade that has spent the last 2 decades helping more than 34,000 people take control of their health. The chances are, as I recently found out, is you could be sabotaging your weight loss journey without even realizing it. In our interview, she reveals why most diets fail and the simple strategies you can implement to permanently lose weight and live a healthy lifestyle, including the benefits of fasting and how to set yourself up for success, why you should never mix alcohol with food, and why sleep is so important to help you lose weight. So please welcome the founder of the Lean program, Miss Amanda Nighbert, to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Amanda Nighbert, thank you for joining us on this week's Escape Your Limits podcast.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I was reading up about you, and they kind of call you the Renegade Dietitian. I was kind of curious about that. Why the Renegade?
I kind of gave myself that term probably 15 years ago when I was working in a clinical setting. I'm a registered dietitian, and spent most of my career in a hospital setting. And I found myself going completely against the grain at some point about nutritional guidelines. And it was really based on my own research and knowledge of where nutritional guidelines started with the food guide pyramid, 6 small meals a day, and how those guidelines were so flawed and potentially have kind of led to our increase of obesity and chronic health conditions. So at the time, I just couldn't continue to kind of preach those old models and took a shift into kind of a new direction. And it was really based on my own health experience with high cholesterol. So while the other dietitians were promoting spray butter and margarine and fat-free everything, I was promoting eggs and butter and whole food nutrition. So initially it was, I was definitely the renegade.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? With I suppose on exercise, there's a number of different ways that you can work out, but with nutrition, it gets even more complicated. And then in terms of who can give you advice is a whole nother set of challenges. And when we interview a lot of people about this, and it's very easy to kind of be doing something for a period of time, like I have done, and you feel you're getting the best information, and then a year or so it totally contradicts. There's some new research, or someone's like, no, they kind of told you half the story, but they didn't tell you the full part. So in your experience, this is what you do as a living. You work with many people and patients. How do you in your role sort of understand the good information from the bad, and what do you do about the stuff that's on the kind of fringes that's just being that's just being talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the challenging part about nutrition, is we make it so complicated. And really my goal is to help people simplify healthy eating. And nutritional science is tricky. It's really hard to, get very concrete studies and data out based on kind of what we're eating. And a lot of times, we're seeing very small sample sizes, or we're seeing very, extreme approaches for short periods of time that create results. So a lot of times the information is, kind of half the picture. In my experience, especially over the last 3 decades, I feel I might be kind of like you. I feel like I've tried it all with myself, and I tried it all with my clients more so. And what I have come to realize just over the last, 5 to 10 years is that at the end of the day, it is about creating balance with regards to our food choices. Whenever we, create fear around macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. I feel like it really feeds into the all or nothing mindset where people feel like, oh, so right now carbohydrates are really big. Everyone's saying no carbs, keto, low fat, low carb is the way to go. But it's when we create this fear of carbohydrates, people are either eating no carbohydrates or they're eating all the carbohydrates, 400, 500, 600 carbs a day. And what we've lost is kind of like this middle ground that, there is an option for, 100, 200 carbs a day to see progress. Same with fat, which is where we were back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s with the low fat recommendations. Everyone feared fat, so we ate no fat. And in response, we ate too many carbs and sugars. So it's really kind of like this imbalance. And I think in the long run, there are very specific dietary approaches that are important and useful in the short term. But I think in terms of long-term progress, we have to find the ability to find balance in our diet, flexibility. So I love that whole 80-20 approach.
Right. With I was listening to, I think it's your TED talk, and maybe it is actually. I listened to a bunch of videos and I kind of confused them up. But I know you were talking about a lot of the food manufacturers, and when this food pyramid came out, there was this sort of anti-fat in the media, and so a lot of the food manufacturers decided to get rid of the fat, eliminate it, and instead they were putting in a lot of sugars and carbs and other stuff that probably wasn't as good as you, which didn't seem to have that much of a good result for people's body shapes. How do you, when you're looking at information and research, how do you identify those studies that have actually been deeply sponsored by some of these food giants to kind of get you to say, well, actually, this is really good? Because it seems as though there's a lot of great studies and they cost a huge amount of money to fund. But if you're able or clever enough to search it back, there's probably someone that's incentivized for that to be common knowledge. Have you experienced that? And how if so, how do you sort of like figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, that is the challenge with nutritional science, is that most of the science is funded by people with specific interests, and you can pretty much find both sides of the story based on, what you're looking for with regards to nutritional science. And the problem is that it is hard to sometimes, track back where these studies are funded from, because they're sometimes funded from these, front groups that these, manufacturing kind of organizations will create to, again, hide themselves from, what they're looking at. So I think it's always important, there's a lot of clickbait out there, is kind of what I call it, sensationalized headlines. And anytime, of course, I have clients and followers that send me research articles, every day, that are like, hey, did you read this? Hey, did you read that? And they're basically taking, their knowledge based on the headline. And sometimes the headline is actually manipulating what the science says. For example, I work with people that implement intermittent fasting, and intermittent fasting is a really hot trend right now with regards to nutritional strategies. And there's a lot of research going on regarding intermittent fasting. And over the last year, there's been a lot of research that's come out against fasting, specifically for women and hormones. And that's just the headline. Fasting is bad for women. Fasting, wrecks your hormones. But when you look further into the study, it'll be a study of, 20 women who fasted for 4 days and their hormones were wrecked. Well, yeah, if you fast for 4 days, if you fast for long periods of time, that's going to impact your hormones. But if you're fasting for, 12, 16 hours a day, that's going to positively impact your hormones. So again, it's really about not taking what you see in the headlines for face value. It's about looking at the full study. What did they look at? What were the parameters? How many people were involved? And then absolutely doing some, really intense research to see who funded this science. That's key.
Have you ever seen what you've just said? Kind of would make me think, well, if I was if I was someone in that position, probably not me, but if I was the sort of like devilish version of me, you could set up a small study that actually contradicts a bigger study and just kind of get it out there. So say, for example, people said, well, sugars were bad. You could do a small research to say, well, we've tested 20 women, and depending on their weight and size, that they managed to lose weight because they ate this sugary food. Does that sort of thing go on in the industry as well?
100%. Yes. It's very, I feel like it's too easy to manipulate your outcome based on what you want to present, if you put somebody on a high sugar diet, but you only allow them to eat 800 to 1,000 calories, well, they're probably still going to lose weight. So it's all relative to the big picture for sure.
Mm. So let's go into why most diets fail. And we've had a lot of people previously on the podcast, and whether it's exercise or fitness, and there seems to be this really strong connection where with anything to do with your body, there's a big influence of the mind. It's almost kind of like starts there. So I wonder if you could give me or give us your experience in terms of some of the key reasons why most diets fail, and some of your tips and advice from a sort of a mindset perspective about how you can think or prepare or mentally get onto some kind of nutritional program that you can adhere to over a period of time.
Yeah, this is exactly what I presented on my TEDx stage in March. And again, I've been a registered dietitian in the field of weight loss for over 2 decades. And initially, when I started as a young new graduate, I was of the mindset that, people failed because they didn't follow the program. People failed because they ate too much. People failed because they didn't exercise enough. But over time, as I started to work with people for longer periods and tried different dietary approaches, I came to realize that it's not the diet that failed. It's actually the mindset of the person doing the diet that is failing. So, in my opinion, the number one reason why people continue to fail at long-term weight loss success is the all or nothing mindset, the need to be perfect in order to be successful. And because what I would notice is people would, let's take January 1st for an example. Everyone's super motivated January 1st to go all in. They'll do crazy diets and they'll be consistent and good with them for the first, month, 2 months, 3 months, however long. Then typically something happens. I call it a pivotal event in their life that causes them to not be able to be perfect with the plan that they've been following. Maybe it's a death in the family, someone gets sick, an accident, a divorce, something that takes their focus away from this number one thing. And in their mind, if they can't do all the steps that this dietary approach involves, then it's not worth doing any. And so they fall back into their old unhealthy habits, and then slowly over time, they gain it all back. And it's really this kind of mindset of, I have to be perfect to be successful in order to see long-term results. And so my number one goal for the clients that I work with, first and foremost, is we got to change your mindset. And we've got to focus on 3 things to help you really break this all or nothing mindset. Number one is drop the need to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect to be successful. You have to be consistently good. Consistency is the key to long-term health and fitness success. So I love the 80-20 approach. 80% of the time you're, doing the things that make you feel your best, eating the foods that fuel your body and fuel your results. And then 20% of the time, you are absolutely living your life with zero regret or zero remorse. And typically that's enough consistency to make progress. Number 2 is to drop the might as well thinking. Let me give you an example. You walk into work Friday morning and there's a box of hot, fresh donuts. And you try really hard to resist because donuts don't currently align with your health and wellness goals, but you end up having a few. And for so many, that event triggers the might as well thinking. Might as well have nachos for lunch and pizza and beer for dinner because I've already blown it. And for many, because it's Friday, it turns into might as well just eat like an asshole all weekend long and start fresh on Monday. We have to realize that that morning of donuts, it did not make or break your success. It's what you chose to do after the morning of donuts that did. So recognizing your ability to reset immediately at the end of a meal that doesn't align with your current health and wellness goals is really the key to consistency, that long-term success. And then the last one is just you simply have to do something. Again, I see people have these pivotal events that throw them off track, and they try to get back on track, but they're overwhelmed with doing it all. And so, again, they choose to do nothing. And at the end of the day, in order to get back on track and to start your journey again, you got to focus on one thing, implement that, make that, something that becomes second nature, and then add something else. Habit stacking, it's really in the long run, it's the small things that you do consistently throughout your day that matter the most.
I know when I first got into or started to understand nutrition, probably sort of like 18 or so years ago, I did some events, and like you said, it was such a although I thought I was reasonably healthy at the time, I realized I wasn't, and to kind of get where it was being described was a major shift. Although I was extremely motivated, it was a nutrition seminar combined with a mindset one, and so I was kind of very motivated to do it, which I think helped. But when I got back and then started, I went out and threw everything out that I'd previously been eating and brought some new stuff. But the first hurdle that I came up against was twofold. The first thing was the kind of foods that I needed meant that I needed to, my shopping habits needed to change. So the place I went to get breakfast, lunch, dinner, the frequency I needed to go there, I kind of had to rechange the way that I did. It felt everything in my life. So that was a big change. Then it came across, well, the sort of things I ate if I was in a hurry and I don't particularly like to cook or have time to cook, that was quite a barrier. So just if someone had given me all the food and delivered it, and I'm not promoting food deliveries, but if they set it all up in an easy way, it would have been a lot easier. But it kind of felt that just coming out the gates, there was a huge amount in terms of my lifestyle, my habits, and that was just in the work week. That wasn't even going into the weekend. So I suppose what tips do you have in terms of and we're probably talking to people that are relatively healthy, but someone who probably some of the patients that you work with that weren't, how do you kind of take them from being extremely unhealthy, where probably very little is what they should be doing, and having that big shift to being able to shop and buy and cook foods that they've probably never even experienced before in some cases?
Yeah. And, you talk about the need to make big shifts, but those big shifts really should start with small changes. One of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to look at the things that, like you mentioned, on your grocery list. What are the things that you buy over and over that are your like pantry staples, your, refrigerator staples? And how can we look for something that is a little bit healthier, whether it be a gluten-free pasta or whether it be, a pasta with more protein in it, depending on, what your needs are and what your goals are. And then as you move forward, that is your new staple. So, it's all about that foundational work, creating a healthy environment in which you live in. If you live in a convenience food, a gas station, with lots of junk food, well, you're going to eat those foods. So it's about, again, finding the small shifts for addressing the foods that you need. Same thing that you said about the restaurants in which you eat. Right now, I think we could all probably list 4, restaurants that we eat the most consistently. So my first suggestion for them is, okay, look at your 4 favorite restaurants and go find the best, option, the healthiest. The salad is not always the healthiest option. I do a lot of macro management. I do a lot of macro education. So when we look at macronutrients, again, sometimes the salad is worse for you than the double hamburger. So understanding, what would be the better choice at your favorite restaurants. And then also, like you said, looking for new establishments that you can lean on, consistently. Here's the thing, you know, we now live in such a rushed, hectic, busy life that, a lot of people don't have time to cook. But in addition, there are a lot more convenience, healthier foods readily available. We just kind of need to know where to get them, and how to use them. So, again, just to kind of summarize, it's all about working on those small shifts that are permanent. Anything that you do that doesn't feel like you can do it forever, you shouldn't be doing it.
In your experience, is a big part of making this successful that convenience factor. So like you say, the restaurants, already knowing what those 2 or 3 restaurants are, what those 2 or 3 things on the menu are, which you're going to order, kind of almost making these things where you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. Would you say that's kind of like a big part of helping you to succeed? And if you put more time into kind of mapping those things out, you're in a good place to continue with it.
Yeah, I mean, those who fail to plan to fail. I always say eating like crap is effortless. It takes zero effort. It's instantaneously, it's everywhere, but healthy eating takes effort. But there are a lot of things that you can do in the front end, either once a week, doing a little prep, a little, consideration of what your food choices are going to look like for the week to come, or even, preparation for the long run by, seeking out, the healthiest option at each of your favorite fast food places, or what you would grab in a convenience store or at the airport if you travel a lot. Just so you know that these are like your go-to things. It has to become second nature. And I think that the reason why, I always tell my clients, I don't ask you to do anything that I'm not already doing myself. Anyone out there that looks healthy, living healthy, has tons of energy, vibrant, lacking comorbidities, it's not effortless. It takes effort for everyone. It's just that the lifestyle that I've created makes my healthy eating more effortless, because of the things that I've done in the past to create this foundation.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code dumbbell. That's escapefitness.com using the code dumbbell. That's it from me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
What are your tips around times where you eat what you shouldn't do? So I'll give you an example. So there's times where I'll go out and I'll choose to eat ice cream because it's a treat. I enjoy ice cream and I do it at certain times with my children. So that's an intentional. I know what I'm doing and I'm going for it. But there's the other times where we're all busy and you've either had an early or a late lunch or whatever. Then you're hungry and you're at home and it's like, right, okay, there's nothing here. So the only resort to kind of deal with that, I need to eat something, is to eat what's there. And unless I've been shopping, then the choices are limited to stuff that's probably not the best things to eat. So do you have any advice in terms of those times where regardless of where you are, you don't hit that time? Look, I'm hungry. I'm not somewhere. I'm at a trade show. I'm not near somewhere where I'm going to be able to get something. And the only thing that I'm going to be able to put in my mouth is just not going to be any good for me.
I mean, it happens, and I think, again, that kind of goes back to my might as well thinking, one that I said is, your ability to, again, eat what's available, eat what you have access to, address that hunger in whatever way possible. it really comes down to what you do next, what the next meal looks like. For most people, it is an excuse to continue to eat poorly because you've already blown it. And that, again, is a cycle then can be hard to break. One discretionary snack, discretionary meal is not going to make or break your success, but multiple back to back is really what will impact, your long-term results. So, recognizing nobody's perfect, you're going to be put in those scenarios, you address it as you can. And then really your number one goal is to get back on track at the next meal and also learn from that scenario. If you find every time you're at a trade show, you are looking for something to eat and there's never an option, well, now we need to bring something with us to every trade show. Same with travel. I work with a lot of people that travel a lot or used to travel a lot. And it's like, if every time you go to the airport, that there's nothing for you to eat, well, bring it with you, and make sure that you don't get stuck in those scenarios. So reset immediately, and then also find strategies to learn from that event so that it doesn't happen often in the future.
Is there any things you can do about that? You say that might as well attitude, which is on a you have one bad meal and it's like, okay, that gives you permission to have multiple bad meals. What about in terms of the portion size itself? Like every now and again, particularly if I'm tired, I've got this soft spot for dark chocolate. And so I'll kind of have this bar. I think it's called Lindt. It's really nice and thin. And just looking at it kind of hooks me straight in. But I'll kind of have a couple of bites. My wife can have like one piece. I seem to, once I've had part of it, I'll just eat the whole bar. And it's quite a large bar. So is there anything you've found in terms of that kind of portion or the discipline to say, well, look, okay, you've had something that's not great, but mentally you don't need to eat the whole bar. What have you got to deal with that sort of issue?
There's kind of two ways that I would look at a scenario like this. I think, like, let's take a bag of chips for an example. If you have a hard time portioning out one bag of one serving of chips and stopping there, then I would invest in small bags of chips, ones that are already pre-portioned, because you feel a lot more guilty about opening multiple bags of small chips than you do about dipping your hand in an open bag of chips multiple times. So I think that's a really, good way to kind of manage if you have poor control over a certain product, either buy it in smaller serving sizes or go ahead and pre-portion it out. Nuts are a really big one that I see people over consume, because nuts are healthy, but nuts are very macro dense and the serving size is very small. So one of the things I suggest is, if you get a jar of nuts, when you get home, go ahead and portion out one serving into little baggies so that you're grabbing kind of one serving at a time. The other thing that I would say is, I think everybody has that one or two food where we have the least amount of control over. Mine is definitely ice cream and or kettle corn. I love both of those, treats. And I know that if I keep a bunch of gallons of ice cream in my freezer, I'm going to struggle to limit it to one serving. So ice cream is something that we enjoy outside the home, where I can go, I can get one scoop, I can walk away. So it's easier to manage versus something that I bring inside the home. So, I describe this to my patients kind of like alcohol. Food is addicting, and junk food is very addicting. And so if you find that you struggle to just eat one or two Oreos, well, don't bring them in the house. If you were an alcoholic and you struggled to avoid alcohol, I'm sure you would not, maintain a fully stocked bar. So stop setting yourself up to fail by bringing these things in the house. And I know as a mom, in the past, I would use my children as excuses. Oh, I'm going to buy these Oreos for my kids, but who would end up eating them? I would. So another tip is, like, if you're a mom, buying a bunch of processed food for your children they don't need it either. Stop buying it for them. I like to use, again, when we're outside the home, as an opportunity for them to eat whatever they want. But inside the home, I try to curate as many healthy snack options, food options as possible, and limit, the distractions of junk food.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree. Those are definitely things that we've found have worked. Our children come back from parties, or we've got Halloween coming up, or Easter, or Christmas, and they get all this stuff. And gradually, we try and sort of bin it, because if it's there, there'll be that time at night where it's like, okay, what's sitting there, and suddenly you'll start going into your children's Easter eggs and destroying those. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was fasting. I've been playing around with this, I guess you could say, for about 4 weeks, and I've been getting on pretty well, to be honest. But there's a lot of different types of fasting, and I suppose I've been doing more time restricted eating, which I guess is a kind of fasting. So probably for people listening, it would be good to just give a bit of an overview in terms of fasting and the different types, and what time restricted eating is, and is that a fast or not, just to kind of paint the picture. And then I've got a few sort of additional questions in relation to that to ask you.
All right, perfect. And I always like to say, as a registered dietitian, I had to put my hand on my diploma and say breakfast is the most important meal of the day in order to, walk across the stage. So to be a dietitian in this space and seeing intermittent fasting as a powerful tool is, not the norm. And it really took my understanding and research of intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, as well as implementing it with myself and a handful of patients to see the power of this type of nutritional strategy. So I'll tell you the reason why. Well, I might have mentioned this a little earlier when I was talking about fasting research, but the reason why intermittent fasting is so popular right now is because in 2016, the Nobel Peace Prize was won due to the discovery of autophagy. Autophagy is a very powerful process in the body where, at digestive rest, the body's able to seek out dead, damaged, dysfunctional cells and get rid of them. So it's kind of like the fountain of youth from the inside out. Up until that point, we were told that not eating does more harm than good. So this was really the first time that someone was able to demonstrate that there is actual benefit in the time between when we finish dinner and we break our fast, breakfast. And it's very powerful. And we're now seeing a lot of research come out about the power of intermittent fasting because of this discovery. And one of the interesting things to look at is that prior to 1977, which was the development of the first nutritional guidelines, as well as the recommendation of 6 small meals a day, our obesity rate was completely flat. From 1977 on, our obesity rate has skyrocketed. So we can correlate a low fat, low calorie diet, 6 small meals a day, the recommendations of the food guide pyramid with, increasing obesity in the United States. Because prior to that, our meal patterns were breakfast at 8, lunch at noon, dinner at 5:30. So by default, we have been fasting for 12 to 14 hours most nights. We just didn't call it that. Okay. Then this whole 6 small meals a day came about, and now we're eating from 6 in the morning till 11 at night. So now we're fasting for, maybe 6 hours a night, 8 hours a night. So it's really potentially this loss of autophagy that has also contributed to our obesity rates and high levels of comorbid conditions like diabetes and hypertension and things like that. So that's why fasting is so popular right now. I believe that everyone should be aiming to fast for at least 12 hours a day. Some people would probably call that time restricted eating, more so a smaller fast. But there is benefits to fasting, longer. I use a 16-8 approach with my clients where we fast for 16 hours and we eat within an 8-hour eating window. And there's a lot of reasons why that can actually accelerate fat metabolism. it takes about 12 to 14 hours for your body to digest your last meal. So really in those last 2 to 3 hours, when our glucose is gone, our insulin levels are super low. Insulin is the number one fat storing hormone in the body, and our glycogen stores are beginning to be depleted. The body is forced to tap into our fat stores a little bit more in order to provide energy. So you kind of get a
So
little
on
bit
that
of
one,
that.
can I
Yeah,
just
go
jump
ahead.
in for a second then? So one of the things that I've been trying to figure out, and I've read conflicting information about this, is that a true fast is where some people do it overnight, which is how I was doing it, or the majority of overnight. That it should, the bulk of it should be done when you're actually in waking hours. Have you heard or read, or do you have an opinion on the sort of best time to do that fasting? Should it be when you're up and you actually, because I find it a lot harder to do when during the day than I do if a big portion of it is overnight.
No, I think that when we look at, again, our patterns of eating for most of our existence, we adopted a circadian rhythm fasting. And I think that that is the best way to implement fasting, which is where you eat when the sun rises and you stop when the sun goes down. So for most people, if you were eating in that nature, it would mean that you would have breakfast maybe like around 7 or 8, but you would wrap up dinner potentially around 5 or 6. So you tend to end your fast a lot earlier at night. And I know myself included, with busy children and sports schedules and things like that, finishing my eating window at 5 or 6 is very challenging. So
Mm.
I typically will find myself finishing mine closer to 8 p.m. So I definitely
Does
think
that
that.
is there a problem with that though? So like, because that's where I am. I have the same challenge, and so I start to eat later, around about 12 or 1, when
Yeah.
I have my first sort of, I break that fast, and then I kind of finish around about sort of 8:30 ish in the evening. Is that a problem
No, I
then?
think that that is, that's the nice thing about fasting. There's no one right way to do it. I mean, you can research and look at all the different variables, but for me, I think that that is the most sustainable and realistic way to implement it. Skip breakfast, break your fast between 10 and 12, maybe have a snack or two, eat dinner, 6, 7, wrap it up by 8.
Mm.
And
And
you have
when
to remember
you
that, while we're sleeping, that's when like the magic's happening. That's when the recovery is happening. That's when, we can burn more fat at night. That's a really powerful time. So, in my opinion, it's best to be fasting, throughout the night.
Mm. And when you start the next day, then, like, what's the definition of you still being on a fast? So one of the things I've done, I kind of come off slowly to extend it, and then I watch you did a really cool video about Bulletproof Coffee, which I thought was pretty good. And so what I've done, and it may sort of relating to your point, was that I'll have a sort of a coffee with butter. I didn't do it in the same way as you do. Yours looked a lot more tasty than mine, and I'm going to try that. But I have a coffee and butter around about sort of 11 or 12, which kind of allows me a little bit longer before I have that first meal. And I just sort of feel better, energy feels good. I still have my meals, but in your video, you seem to indicate that having a bulletproof coffee didn't technically break the fast. Is that correct?
Yes, we call it fat fasting. So you can kind of like Google that term to have a better understanding about it. But, and again, there are different people who look at fasting in different ways. Purists would not agree with, putting butter or MCT oil in your coffee in terms of being in a fasted state. They say all you get is water, black coffee, herbal tea with nothing in it. But the whole issue is that it really comes down, especially when we talk about weight loss, fasting and weight loss. It's all about that insulin response. And we know that fat, butter has zero carbs, zero protein. So there's zero insulin response. There's zero blood sugar, elevation. I've actually worn a CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitor. And when I drink my bulletproof coffee, my blood sugar actually drops. It goes lower. When you use quality butter in combination with blended MCT oil, the research shows that it actually increases your production of ketones. Ketones are really powerful for fat metabolism. And many people that have tried to go on a keto diet to elicit ketosis know that for many it takes 2 to 3 days of extreme low carb eating, high fat eating to get into ketosis. So anything that has the ability to generate ketones, even in the presence of carbohydrates, can be a powerful tick for metabolism. And then, kind of what you said, some people struggle with energy, brain fog, in that fasted state during the morning, and providing, again, quality butter, quality coffee with even MCT oil, which is like rocket fuel for the brain. It really kind of takes that away. It takes the edge off completely. So I don't drink Bulletproof coffee every morning. I don't fat fast every morning, but this morning I did. So it's definitely something in my arsenal that I use to support fasting.
And with that coffee, so I do it with a small coffee. I'm not a big coffee drinker. I kind of have like a double espresso and I put some in and mix it up, and that seems to do the trick. But is there any sort of rules in terms of the outside of what you should put in it, which I'd recommend you check out your video, but is there anything in terms of the sort of frequency? Should you just do it first thing in the morning as you're starting to break the fast, because it will kind of give you a little bit longer, a bit of an energy boost? Should you do it during the day? What have you found is a sort of a good rule of thumb?
So I have a love-hate relationship with the Bulletproof coffee. I love it for all the reasons we've talked about. Again, it can help prolong your fast. It can make you feel really good during a fasted state, but it is also very calorically dense. So, if you're using, a half a tablespoon to a tablespoon of butter with a half a tablespoon to a tablespoon of MCT oil, that's anywhere from 150 to 250 calories. So what I have found sometimes is that, because it is very delicious, is that sometimes people will kind of abuse it. And at the end of the day, calories are king. So that will matter. And so I think you want to be conscious of, what your day entails with regards to your calories and macronutrients and how that actually fits in to the rest of the food that you're eating. So it's not something that I would do multiple times a day. It's really only something I would personally use to help support a fast. Beyond that, I'd probably stick to black coffee or a splash of cream.
Right. Is there any risks or dangers around doing, let's say, this time restricted eating for an ongoing basis, or would you recommend that you break that up so you do it for either in the week and don't do it in the weekends, or you do it for a month and then you come off it, or does it not matter because there's no negative consequences to it?
I think when you're talking about, conservative fasting, like 12 to 16 hours, absolutely, it can be done daily. It always makes me laugh because there's so many people that always skip breakfast. I mean, it's a very common meal for people to skip. But now once we put a label on it, oh, I'm intermittent fasting, now a lot of people have a lot to say about it. So that conservative fasting, 12 to 16 hours, I think you will benefit from. There's no kind of like adaptation to it. People say, oh, I've adapted to it, it's not working now. It doesn't work like that. And it can be done every single day. I think fasting beyond that, there's, so many different protocols. Some people do one meal a day, which is where you fast for basically like 23 hours and you eat 1 hour a day. Some people will do alternating, 24-hour fast. So they fast for 24 hours and then they eat normal and they fast for 24 hours. There's also like a 5-2 approach where you eat normal for 5 days and you uberly restrict your calories for 2. I think some of those more, extreme and advanced fasting approaches are ones that you want to kind of cycle in and out of. I'm not a huge fan of like the one meal a day because I think protein optimization is really important, and you can't consume all your protein in one meal and your body like be, functioning and elevating at its best form. I think spacing your protein out within an 8-hour eating window is kind of really important.
Yeah, I found the around about 15 works quite well to me. And I went through phases, and I've spoke to people about it. Sometimes people say, oh, they can't live without breakfast. And I used to be like that. As soon as I woke up, I'd be hungry. And I've tried this a few times, and it seems as though you start to adapt, and you don't wake up hungry. In fact, the last thing you want to do is put too much food into you. So I've found that I've kind of my sort of taste and when I want to eat has changed a little bit, and it actually fits quite well into my lifestyle as well, which I think is quite a bonus if it's not uncomfortable for you to maintain it over a period of time. One of the things though that I was unsure of is when you then break. So let's assume that the coffee isn't breaking the fast. What is a good thing to start with? Whether it's I make a kind of a protein shake with some nuts, some protein, and a few other things in it. Have you got any things that are good to break when you formally consume some food?
Yeah, I want to just go back real quick about what you're mentioning, people that feel like they have to eat breakfast first thing in the morning. A lot of people fail with intermittent fasting because they don't support their fast adequately enough. I am a huge proponent of electrolytes. I think most people are lacking in appropriate electrolyte balance, sodium, potassium, magnesium. So I found that people that support their fast while they're fasting with electrolyte products, whether it be electrolyte add-ins, electrolyte waters, even just like a little pinch of salt, you feel so much better. So that's just a quick tip. You can find that in my free fasting guide. But in terms of what's the best way to break your fast, I don't think that there's necessarily like one perfect way to break your fast, but I do think that it's important that every meal is well balanced. I think every meal needs to have a good source of protein, a good source of fat, and at least a little bit of carbohydrates. Fat, protein, and fiber are the foods that fill you up and keep you full. They take 4 to 5 hours to digest. So they take you through to your next meal. Whereas high carbohydrate and sugar foods only fill you up and keep you full for about an hour. So you're full and then you're hungry again. So it creates kind of this vicious cycle. So a lot of times when you do I know when I get to lunch and I fasted all morning, I'm hungry. So if I am in a rush and I grab, I don't know, something really high carb, like some popcorn or bagel or something, it's going to backfire and I'm going to struggle with my food choices for the rest of the time. But, if I always make sure that I have, 3 to 4 ounces of protein with some healthy fats and a ton of vegetables with fiber, then I'm much more satisfied. I think the other issue with hunger that's really important that most people are missing out on is the speed in which we eat. Number one, we're not chewing our food enough, and we're not slowing down. So we're not allowing the signals in our stomach time to actually tell our brain that we're full. So I think another really big suggestion with regards to breaking your fast, because again, you can feel very hungry and therefore eat very quickly, is to be conscious about slowing down and try to chew your food 10 to 20 times, while you're eating.
Yeah, that's one that I'd forgotten actually. I remember years ago I practiced the slower eating, and that's another one that I need to reintroduce. Protein, you mentioned protein there, and this is something I learned. We did an interview with Dr. Gabrielle Leon about a year ago, and she kind of taught me a lot about proteins, which made a difference. But I know there's different views about it. But one of the things that I found, and certainly I got my wife to do, was to increase the amount of protein. That definitely had an impact on proteins, and fats had an impact on the amount of food or the hunger that I used to get in between my meals. Do you have any tips on protein in terms of men and women, and then also types of protein? Because I know there's a lot of popularity around non-animal proteins and animal proteins. What are your thoughts on protein in general, men and women, and then types of protein?
Yes, protein is a very polarizing topic. People have a lot of opinions on where we source our protein. And, protein, I always say, is the most important macronutrient for weight loss. Protein is the only macronutrient that we don't have adequate stores of. It is the one macronutrient that must be consumed in adequate amounts on a daily basis. We have plenty of carbohydrate stores, we have plenty of fat stores. We can omit those macronutrients, but there are significant negative impacts to our health, our wellness, and our weight loss when we don't consume enough protein. Now here's the deal, is that we protein is also another macronutrient that we fear. There's so much misinformation about high protein diets, and high protein is bad for you. And again, what's high protein? People will leech on to these, again, clickbait terms, but they don't understand what's the definition of a high protein diet. What does that look like? So when I tell clients that, you need at least half to 75% of your body weight, and they weigh 200 pounds, they look at me and go, oh my gosh, 150 grams of protein, that's way too much. And in reality, that's not a high protein diet for someone who's 200 pounds. So again, it's like the misinformation out there. Most people, again, I work with thousands of people, thousands of clients with regards to weight loss. I would say 90% of my clients come in under eating protein. And my protein goals that I set are extremely conservative. It's like the bare minimum, because I want to be able to yell at them, that they're not getting their protein goal. So I think protein is extremely vital. Again, like we mentioned, protein fills you up. It keeps you full, just like fat does, especially for, muscle development, for metabolism. Protein's important. So for all of those reasons, we need to be making sure that we're getting adequate protein every day. Now, with regards to where we source our protein, ultimately, I think that's up to the person. I don't care if you're vegan or if you're a carnivore. The problem is your protein needs are still the same. And when you're a vegan, it is a lot harder to balance your macros and your caloric intake and get the adequate protein. And that's why I feel like that, group of people that eat that type of diet, they struggle in the long run to feel elevated and energized and nourished and lose weight, because they're not getting enough protein. I'm of the mindset that we all do need quality animal protein. I think when we see information about, animal protein is bad for you, it has to do with, the way that we raise animals now. The way that we make food is unhealthy. But our animals did not traditionally, for example, cows did not traditionally eat corn, to get big and fat. They ate grass. So there is a difference between how you source your protein with regards to animal. I'm of the mindset that quality animal protein is necessary for a healthy diet. I always tell my clients, if there's one part of your food budget in which you can allot for a more quality source, start with animals and fats, because they matter, and start there.
What do you think about protein supplements? So adding, because that's what I do. I guess you can buy a high quality protein, and although that's a whole another subject itself on how to source a good quality supplement.
Yeah.
Do you believe in using that if you can't get it from the sources that you've just
I think that
mentioned?
we live such convenient, crazy, hectic, busy lifestyles that those type of products make our life easier. So I am a huge advocate of a protein shake or a protein bar. And really, it just comes down to, because I recognize how important it is, for our overall health. So I know for me, it's really hard for me to meet my personal protein needs without a daily shake. And I could do it with food, but because I'm so busy and running around, having the ability to grab a shake with 30 grams of protein just makes my life easier.
What is your opinion on sleep, rest, and recovery? It's not something that people tend to think of when they think of weight loss necessarily, but I know it's something that really has a big impact. If I'm like when I used to travel a lot to Europe and back to America, I could really tell for a period of time by the foods that I was attracted to, whether I was recovered quicker than whether I could tell through my sleep. Do you have an opinion on that? And are there any guidelines that you give to your clients about sleeping or recovering?
It is the number one thing that matters for weight loss. And it is the one thing that we overlook the most. I think Americans are sleeping worse than we ever have. We're getting less sleep. More so, we're getting less quality sleep, which it really matters the most. I think that we have, significantly underestimated how important sleep and recovery is to really our overall health and kind of the spiral effect it has, just like what you said on the food choices that you make. Especially with, I hate to say women, but especially as we age. I work with a lot of women over 50 that are post, menopausal, and they struggle with that midsection bloat. Men too, typically as we age, we put more weight on in our midsection. And that's a cortisol issue. It's an inflammation issue. And I think that it probably stems more so from poor sleep than anything else. So sleep is huge. I think it should be at the top of everyone's list. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a client who is doing everything right, eating perfectly, exercising, not drinking alcohol, kind of all the things, and still not making progress. And, when you really dig down to the nitty gritty, it's because their sleep sucks. I love devices like the Oura Ring that actually, oh, you got one too. Yes. That actually, quantify the recovery of your sleep. I know for me, alcohol is a huge sleep buster. Even just one alcoholic beverage will send my sleep score into the tank. And I think alcohol is an issue. I think people are drinking more alcohol on a daily basis than we ever have been over the past 18 months.
So I'd like to talk about alcohol, which will be my final question. But before we do that, for people that would like to know more, you've got some programs and a few other things going on. Can you just share, if people would like to get in touch with you, how they can, and what are some of the products and services that you're offering?
Yeah, so I'm super active on social media. Find me the most active on Instagram. Follow me there. I do run a signature 7-week program. It's a very high touch daily accountability program called Lean, Living Energized and Nourished. You can find more information about that on my website. But I know that this podcast is really geared towards, kind of people like me, health and wellness professionals. And I actually also help health and wellness professionals curate their own group-based program and help them scale their business from working one-on-one with clients to working in these group-based models. That is through my company called Spring. It's Spring without the I. So check that out as well, thespringapp.com.
Thanks, Amanda. So coming back to alcohol then, I guess we all drink a lot, probably too much, and maybe the pandemic's not helped that for a lot of us. Are there any tips in terms of how you can do it well? I'm the same as you. Whenever my sleep score just gets destroyed when I have alcohol, and I've tried all different ways of doing it. The best way I've found is just to kind of drink it earlier on in the day and let it come out of my system before my sleep. But that's about as far as I've got. Do you have any ways on how we can sort of hack that and have a few drinks and on the weekend at all?
Again, I think it is all about, progress, not perfection, 80-20. It's really about the ratio in which you drink. Going back to what we were talking about earlier about, nutritional science, I think it's like really BS for anything to, say that alcohol is healthy in any way, And I think that that's a really good example of how we take something like alcohol, which we know across the board is not beneficial, and we find really small caveats to say that, oh, it's good for you. And that's a really good example of how you can manipulate research and science to make it fit your narrative. So, and here's the deal. Alcohol is detrimental to your health for two main reasons. I feel like maybe three. Number one, a caloric impact, alcohol, especially if you're drinking like margaritas and daiquiris and, high caloric alcoholic beverages, they're gonna impact your bottom line. Number two, alcohol is actually the fourth macronutrient. So carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and alcohol. Because alcohol is the fourth macronutrient, and because there's no appropriate storage form for alcohol in the body, it's a toxin. It has to be removed immediately. It slows down your metabolism. So the easiest way I can give you an example of this, if you sit down to chicken, broccoli, and a glass of water, as soon as you're done eating, your body's going to begin to break down the chicken, broccoli, the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats from that meal and begin that metabolic process. If you sit down to chicken, broccoli, and a glass of wine, your body's actually going to store the chicken and broccoli while it works to get rid of the alcohol first and foremost. So it prioritizes alcohol over the other macronutrients because it's a toxin. And it takes 4 to 6 hours for alcohol to leave your system, which is why you probably have noticed if you, day drink, have some cocktails at brunch, and then, let it leave your system, your sleep is not impacted because 4 to 6 hours later, it's kind of gone. Versus when you drink right at night, your body's busy metabolizing that while you're sleeping. So I always say like that one cocktail a night is, crushing your metabolic response, versus maybe having 2 cocktails on Friday. And then the third reason, what we mentioned, is people just don't understand how negatively alcohol is impacting their sleep because we kind of pass out, sometimes people think it helps them fall asleep. But in reality, it's significantly impacting the quality of your sleep, your body's ability to recover, your body's ability to get through all 3 of those sleep cycles appropriately. And so at the end of the day, it is definitely impacting your long-term health and weight loss goals.
Yeah, I didn't know. I've never heard about that on the food side. That's quite scary. I'm now thinking about whether I should break my fast with a glass of wine.
Trust me, I have people that are like, okay, now if I drink 4 hours before dinner, and I get it. And that's why I always say 80-20, I like to put it in perspective this way. If there's 30 days in a month, 20% is not Friday and Saturday. Okay, that's 8 days. 20% is 6 days. So it is, I say if weight loss is your goal, you should limit alcohol to once or twice a week.
And if you do drink, and I've seen your stuff on Instagram where you kind of put the calories, like, have you found that there's any stuff that's better to drink than others, things that you should definitely stay away from, and things that if you're going to drink, then these are probably 2 or 3 recommended drinks?
Yeah, I think, your liquors mixed with non-caloric beverages like soda water, LaCroix, or, non-caloric mixers are going to be good. Your seltzers are, your low-calorie seltzers, your light beers. So really, when you talk about what's good alcohol versus, bad alcohol, it really comes down to that overall caloric value. If you're drinking soda with lots of calories and sugar, daiquiris, margaritas, things like that are loaded with, sugar and calories. That's not going to be as, good as drinking something that's a little bit lighter, like a dry wine or a light seltzer or something like that. So.
Excellent. Okay. Whenever I have these podcasts, I kind of go away and I'm like, okay, I can't do that anymore. And I can't do this anymore. I had the peanut butter one a few weeks ago where I was advised not to. That was another one of my favorite foods. And so that's had to come off.
Peanut butter is a legume, huh?
So my final question, Amanda, Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make it possible. What would be a memorable example of escaping your own personal limits?
Oh, wow. Well, that would definitely be in my professional development. Like I said, I worked in a clinical setting as a registered dietitian for nearly 20 years, embarrassingly making probably about $60,000 a year. And I turned 40 And I said, I'm either going to sit here in the same position, making the same amount of no money and saying the same thing over and over, or I'm going to branch out on my own and kind of build my own path. And so I made it a goal to start a side hustle, created my program Lean, Living Energized and Nourished, working with clients virtually on the internet. And my goal was to make an extra $1,000 a month. I thought if I could make an extra $12,000 a year, that would give me some extra travel money, which would make me feel a lot better about the position I was in. And 12 months later, I hit $600,000. I, quadrupled my salary. I left my full-time job, and I've been growing my online, group-based programs ever since then, up to well over 7 figures. So it's amazing what you can do when you're motivated and passionate about something. I know that people listening to this podcast are motivated about health and wellness, passionate about helping others. And I'm excited because there's no other time in our history when the general population needs us more than they need us now. So the opportunity to scale your own business is unbelievable. So if you'd asked me when I went out on my own, if I would be here right now, I'd have said no way. So definitely breaking the limits.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great story, and congratulations. It's not easy to do what you've done and just go on and set up your own business. So I really take my hat off to you for that one. And thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us today. And I wish you all the success in your business in future. So thank you very much for your time, Amanda.
So glad to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.